Hi, I'm Charlie Jackson, the Division 4 Director. I'm pleased to announce the first in a series of talks on nuclear energy. So Ahmed Hussein will be our first speaker, and he'll be talking about an introduction to the series. The IEEE Presentation Series on Nuclear Energy has been organized by the IEEE Vancouver Section in collaboration with IEEE Future Directions Committee, and is organized a series of presentations to address the issues of interest for clean energy sources and new nuclear reactor technologies and various issues. The IEEE Presentation Series is intended for a broad audience, not only the engineering community, it's also for a general community with an interest in an energy alternatives, industry and energy provider, regulators, and policymakers. This will be serving the needs of the profession and the public by increasing awareness and a deeper understanding of nuclear technologies. It is not biased or reflect the interests and concerns of only one group. The role of IEEE in the climate change debate is to ensure that our response to climate change is substantial, appropriate, and properly engages IEEE, its members, and the larger technical professions. This is a statement by Saifer Rahman. IEEE provides a neutral platform for discussions, and IEEE will function as a technology provider. The series is brought to you mainly by the hard work of the IEEE Vancouver Section, but also with Future Directions Committee, the IEEE SUSTEC Initiative, the IEEE NPSS Society, and the IEEE Standards Association. Here's a list of the upcoming talks, about 9 in total. We're going to have them about every 2 weeks, and we will be posting them on a location that can be found from the main page. Here's a link to the main page of the conference. And then if you want to get on an email list so that you don't have to register for each talk individually, you can sign up there. I want to invite everybody to our next talk, which will be the movie Nuclear Now. Join us and watch the movie Nuclear Now. People can make comments and ask questions in the chat. We'll save the questions and try to have future talks address those particular issues. Registration and more information is at that link there. That's a vTools link. And with that, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Ahmed. He'll be giving an introduction to the series. I want to say that he's got a long biography, and to me, the most impressive thing is he helped start a whole department at his university. That strikes me as one of the hardest things to do. So, Ahmed, why don't you share your slides and start talking?
Okay, thank you, Charlie. Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to the IEEE series on nuclear energy. And my name is Ahmed Hussein, and here is my some of my information. So the organizing committee for this series here is listed: Dr. Michael Luyten and Charlie Jackson, Dr. Cynthia Davia, Peter Botman, Kathy Grice, Carol Grass, Matthew Wilder, Julie Brinker, and myself. The people here in this list worked very, very hard actually to get this thing organized, and it took a long time and hard work to arrive here. So my sincere thanks to all of them. Here is again the list of the speakers. As you can see that we are going to next time, we will have the to screen the movie Nuclear Now. I'm gonna have a minute or so talking about this movie in a while. However, the speakers here are going to talk about various aspects of nuclear power. and each one of them is an expert in his field. And you can see their biography on the website of the series. And they are excellent people, and they are all volunteered to work on this series. And we are hoping that if this series is successful, that the second round will actually cover more issues related to the production of nuclear power. So the Nuclear Now movie is, I'm quoting this from the website of the movie itself. It's with unprecedented access to the nuclear industry in France, Russia, and the United States. Nuclear Now explores the possibility of the global community to overcome the challenges of climate change and energy poverty to reach a brighter future through the power of nuclear energy. It's directed by Oliver Stone. Of course, I think most of you probably know who Oliver Stone is. He's an excellent director, and he is known, very well known of talking about controversial issues. Now, I'm going to go through, excuse me, go through items of why nuclear is important, and what are the reasons for having a nuclear power in place. The first reason is that there is a global electricity shortage. The global demand for electricity is going up all the time, but it's not keeping up with the population of the world. So we need more capacity to produce electricity so that people, and I'll talk about most of these issues I'm mentioning here now, I'll talk about some of them in details later on. So the issue of the deficiency in energy production, on electricity production versus the population will be the next item to talk to about. I finish with that list. Second is the climate change and the greenhouse gas emissions. Fossil fuels produce incredible amount of greenhouse gas emissions and other stuff too, like ash and the particulates in the atmosphere, and that is contributing to the rising of the global temperature and extreme weather events. The expectation is that by 2030, we should have enough nuclear capacity included in the energy production, the electricity production, so that by 2050, we will have the situation to be neutral, greenhouse gas, carbon neutral, as he said, which means that the world will be preventing production of carbon in the atmosphere as much as being produced. Health hazard of fossil fuels. The combustion of fossil fuels release harmful pollutants, leads to severe health issues, including respiratory disease, cardiovascular conditions, and premature death. We talk about that also later on in details. Transitioning away from fossil fuels is crucial to the public health. The renewable energy, unfortunately, has a relatively high cost of production. And sources like wind and solar are crucial components of a clean energy future, of course, because they are clean. However, they are intermittent, and their infrastructure is costly, and that makes them less economically viable as standalone solutions for reliable base load power. However, also there are certain locations that renewable energy could be preferable over any other kind of source. I'm going to talk about this issue also later on in details. The land use and the environmental impact. Large-scale renewable energy projects require vast amounts of land. I'll also mention that later on and show you some comparison between the various energies and their land use. The advancements in nuclear reactor design is very, very important. There are lots of new technologies coming up, and the new designs are safer and more efficient to use and less expensive to use. All of this in comparison to the current nuclear reactor power stations based on the pressurized water reactor technology. This, unfortunately, the pressurized water reactor technology it's safe, but not safe enough. And it's not as efficient as it should be. It relies only on less than 1% of the uranium ore, etc., and it consumes lots of water, and it produces long-lived isotopes, and all of these issues are being now handled by the new designs. There are lots of new designs that actually can solve, if not all of these problems, at least some of them. I think the talks will probably handle some of these issues later. The radioactive waste, they need to be reduced, especially the long-lived ones. And that can be done by lots of new technologies coming up. And one of them is the fast metal-cooled nuclear reactors. The AI now has gone online. Everybody is using it, and I have used it in some of this presentation here, and the use is expected to go exponential. So, and they also require tremendous amount of energy. And if this energy is going to be provided by fossil fuels, this means that any hope of reaching carbon neutral by 2050 is impossible. So the only solution for this, and luckily enough, all the technical companies that need or produce data farms realize that, and they are going to rely on nuclear energy. As an example, Microsoft has already made an agreement with the owner of the remaining 3 Mile Island reactor to actually reactivate it again, because it was not running for quite a while. And that reactor produces about 819 megawatts. This is unit 1. Unit 2, as you probably, some of you know, that it was destroyed in the accident in 3 Miles reactor, unit number 2, and it was destroyed and shut down completely. So the Microsoft wants to have this the remaining reactor to be activated, and made an agreement with the owner of that reactor to buy the power of that reactor for 20 years, to be used completely for the data farms they are planning to build. The restarting the reactor will take $1.6 billion to get that reactor up, upgraded and refurbished, and to start operating. So Microsoft has done that. Google and Apple and other companies are basically looking for the same thing. Meta has actually made a competition, asking companies to bid for producing energy for their data center they are planning to build, and the process started already. And mostly it will be also nuclear, not anything else. Nuclear power, unlike renewable energy, does not depend on the weather conditions. The nuclear is the only low carbon energy source capable of providing continuous 24/7 electricity, ensuring grid stability and energy security. The grid stability in particular is a very important issue, because if the energy source is not stable, is not sustainable, then the grid will be having lots of difficulties, and people have to work very hard to keep it up. The final thing is the problem. One of the problems of nuclear power is the incredible amount of misinformation and outdated fears continue to hinder nuclear energy production, energy adoption. Sorry, the public is not ready. in many situations. However, in Canada, I think the situation is much better. The bad example is Germany. Germany, unfortunately, shut down all their nuclear reactors. Even Japan, after Fukushima, started to restart some of their reactors, but generally completely shut down their nuclear reactors, and now they are relying on wind and solar power, and that's not enough. And the strange thing is that Germany imports power from Poland and France. Poland produces their power 100% by coal, which is the dirtiest source you can ever have. And France has 70% of France's production of electricity is done by nuclear. So strange enough, Germany, to fight the ended up actually encouraging the production of electricity by coal and electric and the nuclear. It's a strange case. Okay, now we go to some information. Here's the information. This graph here represents the worldwide production of electricity on this axis here, terawatt hour. Terawatt hour is 10 with 12 zeros in front of it. And this is the amount of power produced worldwide over these years, from 1990 to 2050. Of course, starting 2025, there is no information actually available right now. But so from this point on, it is prediction or expectation. That's not the real number. These numbers here are real numbers. So you can see the population is going up at a much faster rate than the production of electricity worldwide. So there is here this gap between the number of people and the amount of electricity produced by them. That point will be very clear from the next graph here. Before I go to talk to the graph itself, let me talk about these two panels here. This number here is the amount of power in megawatt hour per year per person in Europe, in the European Union in general. And the number in the second panel here is the same thing. This amount in megawatt hours per year per person on the average in Canada, the United States, and European Union. It's 11.367 megawatt per hour. This is the industrialized world, the advanced societies. And let us look at the world as a whole now. Here is a megawatt, the energy of megawatt hour per person per year worldwide. This is number here, this curve here is coming from dividing this number here by this population. So you get here at the 1990, it was 2 megawatt per hour compared to 6 and 11. And then it goes up, but very slowly going up. And even going beyond reaching, it is expected to be 8 megawatt per hour, 8 megawatt hour per person per year. 8 megawatt is still much slower than the average of the industrialized world. So the rest of the world need more nuclear, more power to actually be at the level of the industrialized world. And of course, having electricity available in developing nations mean that they can actually get into the industrial age and produce lots of things. Next is we are here comparing the different sources of electricity and their health effect on people. So we start here with coal. Coal is responsible for producing electricity 36% of the global electricity. However, every 1 terawatt hour of power produced kills 24.6 people. 1 terawatt hour per year over a year is energy consumed by 150,000 people. So this means that every 150,000 people served by electricity coming from coal, 24.6 of them will die. Oil represents 3% of the global electricity and have 18.4 deaths. Bear the same amount, 1 terawatt hour per year. Natural gas, 22%, 2.8, the numbers are going down. Biomass is 2%, 4.6. Remember that now, if these numbers goes up to 100%, these numbers, of course, will be much higher than that. Now, biomass is 2% and kills 4.6 people. Hydropower, 12% and kills 1.3 people. Wind is 0.04 and 7%. Nuclear is 10%, 0.03. Solar is 4% and 0.02. Let me give another general statement here. This is a number of deaths that occurs when you are using that resource. For example, coal, from the time you mine the coal, getting out of the ground, prepare it, ship it, you put it in the nuclear reactor, burn it in the nuclear reactor, and then clean up at the end of the life of that power station. This is the total number of deaths because of the health effects, because of the greenhouse gas emissions and the other pollutants, as well as accidents that might happen while people working on mining and transporting the resource. So now these ones here, these 4 here, are completely carbon-free during operation. So they don't contribute to any effects, any health effects on people during the operation. However, this number of deaths here happens during the preparation and the production of the facilities that use those resources. One word here about nuclear is that this number here includes death from the major accidents, which is Chernobyl and Fukushima. Fukushima, by the way, United Nations, the International Atomic Energy Agency is monitoring the situation in Fukushima continuously, and so far they found no evidence that there are people dying or died because of the incident in Fukushima. The number of deaths in Fukushima came as a matter of fact because people were panicking and trying to run away from the location, and the result, there were accidents where people died. No death has so far been contributed to the disaster in Fukushima. Chernobyl, on the other hand, had really effect on people. There are people who died immediately and directly from the accident, and others developed some health effects like cancers and others that persisted over the years. So the total number, this 0.03 in nuclear, includes all the effects of Chernobyl. And the last thing is 3 Mile Island. This is a major accident, actually. The unit number 2 reactor went through a partial meltdown. It's a major accident. The reactor is completely destroyed and was completely scrapped. However, no radiation has escaped into the compound, and no radiation has escaped out in the air or in the ground or anywhere else. The whole amount of radiation was contained within the reactor itself. So there are no deaths is contributed to the major accident in 3 Mile Island. Okay, now the greenhouse gas emissions. Again, the same sources with the same percentage of world nuclear power. The coal produces, now this is the unit here is different. This is 1 gigawatt hour. This 1 gigawatt hour is the consumption of 150 people. Now, coal produces 970 tons of greenhouse gases through the entire operation. Oil, 3%, 720 tons. Natural gas, 22% of the global electricity, 440 tons of greenhouse gases. Actually, normally it's a greenhouse gases equivalent or carbon dioxide equivalent, things that will have the same effect on the atmosphere and the environment. Biomass is slightly less. Hydropower is only 24 tons. Hydropower does not produce any, again, those four here don't produce any greenhouse gases during operation. It's only during the preparation for the resource to be used. So hydro is 24 tons. That's basically coming from the pouring of concrete and the building of the power stations. Wind is 11 tons. That's while the mining the materials for the turbines and building them. That includes also accidents, by the way. Nuclear energy, 6 tons. That's basically from the emission during the mining of uranium. Solar is 53 tons, and it varies based on what kind of technology being used to produce the solar panels. It's between 83 tons, and the average is 53. So you can see that those are cleaner resources, and if the electricity will be produced by clean resources, then these numbers will drop, because in this case, for example, the mining of uranium is done by electricity or power coming from a clean source. Then there is no greenhouse gas emissions here. So even those numbers here will disappear once those ones here disappear. And because right now, any manufacturing or processing in these things here are using those, which are the main ones right now. The second item here I would like to talk about is the energy density of the source. If any material that has energy in it, the higher the amount of energy content in the material, the better it is. So for example, you have firewood, dry firewood has 16 megajoules per kilogram. What that number means, it probably could mean something if you look at it as this is enough energy to boil 53 kilograms of water. So if you burn 1 kilogram of firewood, you can use that energy produced to boil 53 kilograms of water. Brown coal has only 10 megajoules per kilogram. So as a result, 1 kilogram of brown coal produces boils 33 kilograms of water. Black coal is between 13 and 23 megajoules. On the average, it can boil 1 kilogram can boil 77 kilograms of water. Natural gas has 38 megajoules per cubic meter, and so 1 cubic meter produces enough energy to boil 127 kilograms of water. Crude oil, higher, 45 to 46 megajoules per kilogram, 153 kilograms of water can be boiled by 1 kilogram of crude oil. When it comes to uranium, this is now the amount of joules, the amount of energy in 1 kilogram of natural uranium. It's 500,000 megajoules. It's 500,000 megajoules per kilogram of natural uranium. However, natural uranium, not all of it actually produce power in nuclear reactors. Only about 1%, which means that in 1 kilogram is 1 gram is responsible for producing this 500,000 megajoules. So by burning 1 gram of uranium-235 in 1 kilogram of natural uranium, then you can boil 1.5 million kilograms of water using nuclear power. This is why nuclear power is the most efficient nuclear energy available right now. Fusion might be better than that, but that's when fusion is available. As far as the renewables, wind and the solar, photovoltaic solar panels, to produce, here I'm looking at how can we produce 1 kilowatt of power. The turbine speed, if the turbine speed is rotating at 45 kilometers per hour, then the turbine with a blade area of 0.85 meters square will produce 1 kilowatt hour, 1 kilowatt power. If the wind speed drops to 14 kilometers per hour, then to produce 1 kilowatt, you need a much bigger turbine, 31 square meters. Solar panels, if the solar panel has a surface which is perpendicular to the sun's rays at noon, with sun directly overhead, then 1 meter square of solar panel will produce 1 kilowatt. For an hourly average of 1 kilowatt taken over a day, then you need a much bigger area, because over a day means that there's nothing coming at night, and the areas when the sun is behind the clouds, then you need 2.5 to 5 square meters for 1 kilowatt hour. You can expand from that to the bigger ones for megawatts. The requirements will be huge. Land use. Land use, natural gas needs very little land, 0.02 to 0.05 square kilometers. This is really the best one in terms of land use. It's about 5 to 12 acres. Solar will require, that's for a power station that produces 300 megawatts using natural gas. 300 megawatts using solar require 5 to 7 square kilometers, 1,200 to 1,800 acres. Wind will require a lot more, between 50 and 70 kilometers to produce 300 megawatts, which is 12,000, 17,000 acres. However, wind, actually, this number might not be really exact for at least some of the wind farms, because it depends on where at the location you can actually use the land for agriculture and other activities. So the land use for wind in certain situations will be less than that. Nuclear is being half to 1 kilometer square, which is 120 to 250 acres for a power station producing 300 megawatts. The next one I'm going to talk about is the capacity factor of power station. The capacity factor of power stations is a bit difficult to explain. However, it's written down there. However, it is that if you run a power station for, say, 1 year, how much power produced during that year compared to the maximum power the power station can produce. So, for example, if you have 100 power station that maximum can produce 100 megawatts running over a year, you compare that to the actual amount produced by that power station during that year. This is called the capacity factor. Nuclear power plants is between 90 to 95%. So if it's 100 megawatt power station, over a year, for example, it will be used 90% to 95% of the time. This is basically because these numbers here is reduced from the maximum because of the time for maintenance and the time for changing the fuel. Putting the fuel is consumed, you add new fuel and all of that, or the time the station is not operating. So this here number is high here for nuclear power because it requires very little maintenance. It's mainly little maintenance, except at the end of the power station, at the end the life of the power station, that when you need lots of cleaning. But during the operation, the time to actually fuel the power station using the nuclear will be very small because we need to fuel it every a year or 18 months, not every 2 days or every month or every hour, like in case of coal, for example. Coal power plants, 40 to 70%. Natural gas, if it's a combined cycle, this combined cycle used one turbine primary, and the heat left over from the first turbine used in a second turbine. This is between 50 to 60%, and if it's a single cycle, it will be 10 to 20%. Hydro plants, 30 to 50%. That also is affected because of the flow of the water can change. Wind power, the same thing. Onshore is 25 to 45%. Offshore, it's 40 to 50% because offshore, the wind is higher and more steady than onshore. Solar power, 15 to 25% for photovoltaic, 20 to 40% for concentrated solar power. The concentrated power solar power, for those who don't know, is that it's a series of large amount of mirrors that reflect the sun rays into a container that has water, and the water will boil, produce steam, and the steam can be used to produce electricity. These are much better efficient than the photovoltaic. That's why it is 20, 40%. Biomass plants, 60 to 80%, depending on the kind of material used in to be burned in the power plant. The last one here is this quantity, which we call it EROI. This is EROI is energy returned and energy invested. If you are using any one of these resources, you need to spend the energy to get that resource to work and to produce energy. So the resource has to produce more energy than it consumed. The consumption of energy is, we did this study. I was one of the people who participated in that study, and it was very tough study, really, but we have it, and it's very popular. It's one of my most read papers, this one here. We calculated the amount of energy they spend to prepare the raw material, to mine it, prepare it, ship it, and put it in the power station, run it, and until the end life of the power station, and the energy consumed in dismantling the power station. So, which means that this is the total amount of energy used in the power station using that resource over the entire life, from the mining the resource until the dismantling of the power station, and the energy produced during the operation years. Now, we found out that we use the energy. We didn't want to use money, because money value changes. So to calculate this energy, we looked at the data available, and if it is available in terms of energy, we used it. If not available in terms of energy, it's money, then we transfer the money to energy by knowing the price of energy at the time the money was spent. And then the total amount was added. So the blue lines, I'm going to talk about the blue lines first, and then the yellow lines later on. So solar photovoltaic produce only, you put one energy unit, you get 3.9, 4, 1 to 4. So you are gaining only 3 units of energy from extra energy from the solar panels. The biomass produces about 3.5. Wind is 16, which is much better than these two. Solar, concentrated solar power in the desert produce 19. So you put 1 unit in building the thing and you get 19 units back. The combined cycle gas turbine produce 28 units. Coal, 30 units. Hydro, 49. Nuclear, current nuclear, which is the pressurized water reactor, is 75. The new designs coming up, the new technologies coming up in nuclear will improve that number tremendously. Either way. Now, the yellow lines are related only, have effect only on the ones that are intermittent and require storage. So, for example, you can add storage to solar power, but that will mean that you spend more energy, and the end result will be 1.6. Biomass does not need the storage. Wind need the storage. So when you do storage, add storage to wind, you drop to 3.9. Solar drops 9. And hydro also need the storage in certain situations where the water supply is not steady. Then you need to store it so that you can use it when the water supply is low. So it drops to 35. Nuclear, coal, natural gas does not need the storage because it's not intermittent. So this is now the end of my talk. I have a few slides explaining what is nuclear power and where it's coming from and how it's being used. If some of you are interested in this, or enough of you are interested on this, please let us know, then I can continue to explain that. Otherwise, I will finish the talk here. Can you raise your hands, and if you find out, Charlie, can you find out if enough people would like to go through this?
That's pretty hard to do. I can't really tell. Kathy, can you see the response?
Yes, we can see there are quite a few hands raised, Charlie.
Okay, then please proceed, Ahmed.
Okay. Okay, the uranium and nuclear power comes so far from uranium. Even though people say thorium, but thorium is not really a direct source of energy. But energy can be produced using thorium. But right now, uranium is the main material, the main natural material. So to explain to you what that means, we have two kinds of uranium. One is called uranium-235, the other one is called uranium-238. Inside the uranium nucleus, you have 143 neutrons and 92 protons. In the 238, it's same number of protons, but actually 3 more neutrons extra. Instead of 143, 146. This one here is the one that actually fission in nuclear reactors, this 235. In particularly in the current nuclear reactors, the pressurized water reactor. And this one is 0.72% of the natural uranium. And the rest of it is 238. 238 does not fission in current reactors. So reactors use this. It's less than 1%. And that's not enough to actually make a reactor work and produce enough energy. So what they do is they do the process called the enrichment. They reduce the amount of uranium-238 and the rate, so that the percentage of 235 goes up from 0.72% to between 5 and 20%. This process, by the way, is quite expensive and takes quite a bit of time to do. Now, what happens with uranium-235? If if you have a neutron hitting a nucleus of uranium-235, now this nucleus here has too many neutrons, 143 neutrons. Adding one more disturbed the system. The system gets disturbed, and now the system like to settle back. So what happens is the following: the neutrons and protons inside start moving around, being disturbed by the new neutron coming in, and they become uranium-236. The uranium-236 will split into two smaller ones. And one case will give 2 and 1 neutron, free neutron. Another situation, the same nucleus, instead of splitting these two particular atoms and 1 neutron, they can split into 2 with 2 different smaller atoms. And the third case is 3 neutrons and 2 different atoms here. These ones here are called fission fragments. This is the waste material that is stayed in the reactor after the process is done. These are radioactive materials. And that's the radioactivity that remains in the reactor after the operation. However, in this process here, according to the Einstein equation, E equal mc squared, the amount of energy here, if you calculate the mass of this nucleus here, and the mass of these two, the mass of the 3 neutrons, add them together, compare it to this one here, we'll find this here have less mass than this one here. This means that a little bit of mass is lost. Where did it go? It goes into energy, which is around 200 million electron volt. This is a special unit. Later on, you will see it in the normal units, the usual units. So 200 million electron volt means it's a very tiny amount of energy, really. It's a very, very small, 3.2 10 to the minus 11 joules. This is not even an energy you get from a candle. Okay. However, because 1 kilogram of uranium-235 has 2 times 10 to the power 24 atoms, then each one of those atoms will produce this amount of energy. So the total amount of, if you burn 1 kilogram of uranium, or fission 1 kilogram of uranium, you reduce 7 10 to the power 13 or 76 terajoules of power. This is huge amount of energy from just 1 kilogram. This is the source of the energy, where the nuclear energy coming from, is the loss of mass between the uranium, which has extra neutron, and the fission fragments the 3. Sometimes it's 1 neutron, remember? Sometimes it's 2 neutrons, sometimes it's 3. On the average, it's 2.5 neutrons. So in 1 year, 1 kilogram of uranium in 1 year produces 2.4 megawatts. Okay, this is joules and this is watts. Divide the joules per the time, you get the watts. Okay, now that's how that energy is being used in a nuclear reactor. What happens here is very interesting thing. You have now uranium-235 and the neutron coming in. Then it splits, produces 3 neutrons. Let us say at the beginning 3 neutrons. Then there will be still uranium sitting all over here. So these 3 neutrons can interact with the neutron, the uranium that exists there. Let us say 2 of them will hit 2 other uranium nuclei, and this one here escapes, doesn't interact with anything. Then this situation here will have 2 neutrons here, have 3 neutrons here, and this means that these 2 neutrons are going to fission new atoms and so on. So this process goes like that, yes. And so you can see that we started with 1 neutron here and ended up with all of these neutrons here. And these neutrons were going to continue to fission some more. This process, these neutrons here, the energy is, where is the energy gone? The energy is gone as kinetic energy for these particles. They are moving in, hitting each other and hitting the uranium, losing the energy and heat the whole setup. And the neutrons also will have their energy and they lose them inside. However, this is called fission chain reaction. If that fission chain reaction is done such that in every one of those processes, only 1 neutron produce new fission at this point here, then the reaction will be steady and produce steady power. This can be done in a nuclear reactor. I'll show you in a minute how. However, if this process is left to on its own, it goes on very fast, extremely fast. And this means that the entire amount of the uranium will be reduced in a short period of time. This is an explosion. This is what nuclear power, nuclear bomb is. In a nuclear reactor, they don't let the reaction go this way. They only have steady power and they consume the total amount of uranium over a year or 2 or 3 or 4 and so on. Now, this is a simple design, or not design, really, a simple picture of how a nuclear reactor works. Here you have these rods. The blue rods, the dark red rods are the fuel rods. These are the uranium rods. And the blue rods are called the control rods. So you have several of those each. Normally, then this is a reactor core. Here is a container, sealed container. And inside here, there will be water. Okay. Then the nuclear chain reaction will start. You started the chain reaction with all of these control rods outside completely. Then there will be only the uranium. So the fission chain reaction will take place. Once the power reaches certain range, the control rods will go down. And the control rods, what they do, they absorb the neutrons. They prevent them from going into further fission. So the result is the steady power will be done by putting this control rods slowly inside the reactor, not completely all the way. But if you want to shut down the reactor, you drop this rods all the way in. So they absorb all the neutrons and the reactor will shut down. While operation, the water here will heat up. The heat will be generated here, and this here will be transferred from here to here. This is another container outside. The hot water will go up. Actually, that hot water will be very, very hot. That water here boils at 100 degrees, but this tank here is preventing it from boiling at 100 degrees. It can boil at 300 degrees. So you have a steam going up at 300 degrees, goes in here. The steam here is heated that water, and more steam will come up, go here, the turbine, rotate the turbine, produce electricity. The steam now will become colder and become water, falls down here to be cooled by water coming from outside, and the cold water will be injected back here to go down back into the reactor to be heated and so on, and the process goes on. Now the problems here are these rods. These rods will contain the fission fragments that are radioactive, and also the uranium-238 that is not fissioned inside the reactor here absorb the neutrons and produce, through series of decays, materials that are long-lived. They live for thousands of years. This is the waste that people are talking about that had to be stored for thousands of years. new designs will actually consume those long half-life materials, and they will be efficient as well. So this way, this means that the new designs will have only the fission fragments that are radioactive but short-lived. They can be stored for a short period of time compared to the ones that produced by the current pressurized water reactor. So that's all I have. I hope that was useful. So I leave you now with these two cartoons. So we can see the questions now, Charlie.
Okay, Ahmed, thank you very much. Let's give people a chance to look at the cartoons. Some general comments are that some of the questions that are being asked are going to be very hard to answer, and in fact would be a full other talk.
Okay.
In particular, a full discussion of the pros and cons of nuclear energy would be a full talk and doesn't have a quick answer. And one comment toward the end of the chat says, isn't the elephant in the room the upfront cost of nuclear? I think the elephant in the room is that we need zero carbon emitting power as a baseline. And again, that question is a very deep question. Let's see. Trying to sort through the questions. There are a lot of really good ones, and we'll have to save them and try to answer them in future ones. One question that I was wondering about, does Canada recycle its nuclear material? Does France?
No.
Okay. And then one comment that is interesting is that
Well, let me qualify. No, as far as I know. Sorry. Unless there is some recycling, but I'm not so aware of it.
when I say recycling, I guess I mean repurification.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Okay. And then with respect to natural gas, I was surprised to find that 10 to 20% of natural gas goes missing after it's been captured, and another large percent is actually when they frack and get it out of the soil is leaking. So the comment was that natural gas leaks is missing.
Oh,
Um,
I don't know that.
yeah, so that's something you might want to look into. Trying to process these questions. So one question is that there's a lot of talk about AI requiring huge amounts of energy. And what do you think about the comment of this unplanned additional requirement for power?
I'm sorry, what is the question again?
Artificial intelligence requires a large
Yeah,
amount of power to process. And I believe it's an unplanned additional increase. So when people make projections, they have to add some energy to the future. Do you think this is going to be a major contribution to the total power requirements in the future?
oh, well, yeah, this, of course, the energy used for the AI will not be available for the public to use. So I think those need to be separate, but the demand on energy will mean that the AI, to supply AI with enough energy, if you do that with
Yeah.
fossil fuels, is going to be a problem. So it has to be clean energy, and they chose nuclear because of that. But that is definitely is not going to help to close the gap between the actual production and what really needed in terms of raise the power availability to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is separate.
So again, one reason why some of the artificial intelligence processing plants want nuclear is that it's guaranteed 24/7, whereas a lot of other sources can have interruptions. There was a
Yes.
question about for the storage of wind energy, was pumped hydro storage or battery storage, or was it something else in what you were talking about?
I really don't know much about the storage availability, but as far as I know, there is a lot of talk nowadays about the reduction of the cost of storage devices.
Yeah,
And that means if there is a real the reduction in the cost of storage, this means that the ROI for solar and wind will become better than what I presented in the so it's a storage for example, there is a nuclear reactor being built now. I'm not sure exactly who is building it, will basically use the energy produced by the nuclear reactor and store it in a molten salt. And that can be used over a longer period of time. And that can, if that can be used with wind and the solar, that could be actually a cheaper storage devices than batteries. Batteries so far are very expensive.
right.
But there is lots of talk about reduction in the cost of storage, and that will be a serious development if it can be achieved.
And then another one, if you could expand on it, you said that intermittent resources such as wind and solar are insufficient alone. They're asking, can nuclear fill the gap? Um, I think one of the paradigms, I think the question might be put a different way. A paradigm shift for nuclear power in the past has been it runs at maximum generation. And one different way to use nuclear power is to have it vary during the day to complement other sources. Is that what you think nuclear power can do in the future?
Well, maybe in areas where the nuclear power can be suitable, where the sun is shiny most of the time, and the closer to the equator, where the amount of sun power will be high, then yeah, you can then in this case use nuclear to just compensate for the loss. That's all, and instead of storage, for example. But the sense in nuclear is really high density compared to solar and wind. It doesn't make sense to me to actually use solar to back up wind and solar, especially with the large land use and all of that. So
Yeah.
if you build the nuclear, you might as well build the nuclear and make it available. I mean, enough of it to supply the need for the location.
Okay. Um, let's see. So let's wrap up and ask one final question for you. How did you decide to go into the nuclear field? What led you here?
Oh, that goes back to my undergraduate years. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it was interesting to me. When I was in high school and heard about energy, mass converted to energy and energy converted to mass, that's really what hooked me into nuclear. And when I went to university, I uh, took lots of courses in nuclear physics, and ended up doing my master's and PhD in nuclear physics, and basically dealing with neutrons. I didn't really do any nuclear power research in my graduate school. And after that, I was really mainly working on nuclear reactions and particle reactions and all of that. But I got an idea of a nuclear reactor, and we designed it, and we were trying to build it. But there are problems in there. But yeah, it was a very interesting field for me. Started way back in high school.
Very interesting. With that, we've sort of passed our hour a little bit. I want to thank everybody who joined us, and I want to thank Ahmed for a very interesting talk. We'll collect the questions that are remaining and try to incorporate them in future talks. And with that, again, I want to thank everybody for joining us and have a good rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.